to the next edition of the Holland Office Museum's Artifact Video Series. My name is Ryan Duffy and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we're going to talk about one of the more natural landmarks and popular sites from the 19th century in Genesee County, and that is the Oak Orchard Sour Springs. Now, the springs in question were located in the northern part of the town of Alabama, and today that area is actually the Iroquois National Wildlife Refuge. Now, the springs get their name Sour Springs from the various minerals that bubbled up in the 9 springs that were located up there. And they each all had a variance to them in terms of the minerals involved. Now, out of the 9, you had 1 sulfur spring, 1 magnesia spring, 1 iron spring. You had 3 acid springs, though out of the 3, none of them were identical in any way, so they had different compositions. Then you had a natural gas spring, and then you had one which was crystal clear and actually had a semi-sweet taste. Now, these springs have been known to the Native Americans of the area for hundreds of years before white settlers arrived in the area, but it soon became a commercial product once settlement was opened up to the area, beginning in the very early 1800s. Now, one of the first documented cases of the interactions with the springs happened in 1816 when a man by the name of Alexander Kuhn was traveling through the area from Shelby up in what is Orleans County today, going through the swamps there, and came across the springs and was going to water his horse, but the horse would not drink. And as Alexander went to the spring in question, it actually had a vinegary, almost rancid smell to it. And this was sort of one of the first popular discoveries of the springs in terms of the settlers who would be coming there. And it was from here that sort of the popular ideal of the mineral springs would arrive. Now, a few years later, the medical properties of the springs would come to light as a local Native American, most likely from the Tonawanda Reservation, made his way up to a doctor in Shelby Center and offered him up some of the water from one of the springs and saying that it would treat any cut and allow it to heal very rapidly, and a doctor wouldn't be needed, or a medicine man. And it was after this that the true nature and the viability of these springs was brought to light and started to cause a rush on the springs and to bottle the essence for commercial value. However, it would be several decades before this would really take off, become a true commercial venture. Around 1840, several investors from New York traveled up to the springs via the Canal Packet Waterway that connected Genesee County up to the Erie Canal up in Orleans County, and visited the springs and instantly saw that there was some money to be made here by bottling up the spring water and selling it for medicinal purposes. By 1844, this group had actually purchased all the land surrounding the springs and had started the bottling process. And during this bottling process, they actually color-coded their bottles to the spring, or the type of spring that it came from. The bottles would actually be tinted blue, green, amber, yellow, and black, and they would each represent the different springs where they came from. Now, we actually have a few examples here that I'd like to show you as I talk a little bit more about the bottle and the process that came about. Now, we have 3 examples here of different Oak Orchard spring bottles, and as you can see, each of them has the Oak Orchard acid spring embossment on them. And we have a green, an amber, and a darker brown one, which might have been a black colored one, but it's definitely a darker brown and an amber one. Now, the company that would arise out of this operation would actually ship bottles all over the country, and by the end of the 1840s, they were selling 25,000 bottles a year at 25 cents each. So they were very profitable with this process. And because of the popularity of the mineral water from the springs, they were actually able to build a 37-room hotel nearby and actually piped in water from the springs to use for mineral baths. And this hotel was known as the Spring House and actually had a large porch wrapped around 3 sides where people could sit out and enjoy the fresh air of the wilderness out there. And they also even had a large ballroom and dance hall, which was on the 3rd floor. So this became a major spot for tourists, not just from New York State, but from around the country, and particularly from the southern states. Now, eventually, with this popularity growing, they had to build sufficient transportation to get up to the hotel. So a plank road was built that led up to the springs and to the hotel. And one of the major investors, a Thomas Olcott out of Albany, he eventually became the sole owner out of this group and was able to buy out all the rest of the partners in 1856. Now, the properties of the spring water were very alluring to a lot of people for their medicinal qualities, especially those from the southern states who would come up every summer to, one, escape the oppressive southern heat, but also to partake in the healing waters that the Oak Orchard Acid Springs could provide. And at this time, these springs were actually almost as popular and well known as those in Saratoga, which was another major resort spot based around mineral springs. However, with the outbreak of the Civil War, most of those southern customers could not make their way up to the Oak Orchard Springs, and it cut off a lot of their customers. And eventually, Olcott abandoned the spa, and the hotel was essentially left to rot. In 1912, the hotel was actually struck by lightning and burnt completely to the ground, basically destroying any structure that was associated with the springs. So it's very hard to find physical evidence of the actual operation there other than a lot of the bottles, such as the ones you see here. Now, these bottles are not bottled in Alabama or near the springs. They would send them out to other locations. Looking on the back, we have one from Lockport. We have one from Broadway, which is getting closer to Buffalo. And we have another one from there as well. So they would ship them out to be bottled, but the water was piped in right from there in Alabama. And these bottles have become highly sought after collectible items, especially amongst those who specialize in glass and bottles. But there's several large collections around, including at the Alabama Historian's Office. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of our Artifact video series. And I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit more about the Oak Orchard Acid Spring operation that was around in Genesee County during the 19th century. In case you've missed any of our previous episodes, you can check them out on our YouTube channel, Holland Land Office Museum. And we'll be continue making more of these in the future, so stick with us as we do that. But if you found any of these particular topics very interesting, please stop on by the museum and check things out for yourself, and we'll be happy to share even more information about them with you.